Hey, Talk Universe. Hope you are doing well. I'll give you a couple of seconds to jump on in and tell me how you are doing. Would love to hear from you. And actually, today is a very special day because, as you can see here, we are celebrating as of tomorrow will be the 365th daily podcast. So that's right. I have just wrapped up a year, an entire year of daily interviews with other TED and TEDx speakers. It has been a tremendous year. I want to give you just a quick update. What could possibly be next after this? What tops having an entire year of daily podcasts with some really incredible people, especially the last 10 days or so? Oh my gosh, the caliber of guests that I've had and what they've accomplished, it's really been something else. So a couple of changes and improvements coming up that I wanted to just let you know about. And actually, I need to do that pretty quick because I've got a interview session scheduled. This is a private one, and I'm going to be doing a lot more of these private ones for reasons I'm going to share with you here in about 5-6 minutes. So first improvement is we are going to a weekly show. You know, I wanted to pull up my sleeves and get to work. And I wanted to see what my limits were in terms of being able to interview up to 5 people at a time and combining those back to back. That has been pretty cool, being able to interview up to 10 people in a session. Very, very cool stuff. You know, since I also have this as well, there have been some really cool things happening on the TED front. When I started this podcast, Chris Anderson, the head of TED, and everybody else who was official at TED, they had a whole bunch of NPR radio shows. They had a bunch of podcasts, and those podcasts only consisted of just rebroadcasted TED Talks. And I'm thinking, why don't they do what I'm doing, which is to create new content or go behind the scenes? They've left so much on the table, and I have just been picking at that 7 days a week for the last 52 weeks. It's been incredible. It's been awesome. And I'm really happy to say I'm seeing that other people, I think Chris Anderson, the curator of TED, has decided to do his own podcast with original stuff, with, I believe, interviews, his own original stuff. So I'm really happy to see that. It's good to be on the bleeding edge of things. Here's another thing that I'm really happy to see. And you know what? You're beating me to the punch, Ashwin, because I was just going to brag on you, and I was going to brag on my other guest, Bruce Friedrich of the Good Food Institute, the scat man, Ashwin Naidu. I interviewed these two gentlemen within, I think, 4 days of each other back in the 130s. And both of these gentlemen, I had no idea that the TED Fellows program was about to name all of their finalists for 2019. I do have a former classmate who was a TED Fellow in 2018, who I did not yet bring on the podcast. But Ashwin Naidu, Bruce Friedrich, they were both named. Not just did they apply, but they were named TED Fellows for 2019. So I think what I would love to do, I know both of you are incredibly busy people. I'm thinking about reaching out to both of these gentlemen and seeing if we can't have a 3-way interview to find out what that experience has been like for them thus far. So there's really, really great stuff. After you do, 350 interviews with 350 amazing people, 365 amazing people, you start thinking, what's next? And you start reflecting, what the heck have I learned from all of this? And here's one thing I'm going to tell you. The biggest thing that I've learned is that really the power of podcasting and interviews specifically, as a public relations tool for organizations, for corporations. Why is that? Well, there's so many reasons. And when you interview 100 people, when you interview 50 people, when you interview 300 people, 400 people, you start realizing the power of this medium. First of all, you've got third-party validation. I mean, other people saying great things for you, other people asking you questions, just the nature of people asking you questions. If people are asking you questions, then you're really going somewhere. Just implied in the conversation, being asked a question is a powerful thing. And not all questions are good questions. You could have time waster questions, really low value questions. You could have repetitive questions. Those aren't good questions. So having a way to kind of determine the caliber of the question in advance is actually a really valuable thing. You notice the higher profile somebody is, especially, if they're an elected official, they don't necessarily want to do interviews. And the reason for that is there could be gotcha questions as well. And I have never planned on asking a gotcha question of anybody, but there have been times when I've interviewed so many people and I've asked questions and I've had to kind of hold back because I realized things could be construed as a gotcha question. I've been a guest on other people's podcasts, and they kind of started asking me, some of them, gotcha questions. Not every situation, and not deliberately trying to, but there's a real level of skill and nuance that I've realized in doing this. I've realized there's value in producing podcasts, and just the faithfulness that you have to have in your team. I knew I wouldn't be able to have that faithfulness as an interviewer and a editor and a producer. So I outsourced a lot to my talk ninjas. That's the only reason I was able to do what I was doing. The reason that every normal podcast out there, the average podcast lasts 6 or 7 or 8 episodes, and then they just go off the radar, and you see a podcast, and it's like the last episode was like in 1998 or something like that. I'm exaggerating a little bit. Why is that? Because they run out of content, they run out of stick-to-itiveness, they run out of just desire to do it, and that's not good for your brand, frankly, when you stop. So that's part of the reason why I'm announcing here on this Facebook Live, as I have 1 minute to go, that this is transitioning. It's not a daily show anymore, folks. I don't know what more needs to be proved after you've got a whole year of daily podcasts, especially interviewing TEDx speakers, TED speakers, as I have done. There are plenty of other podcasts out there. They've been doing a daily for a lot longer. And so, I don't see any need to keep going on with the daily. Actually, I've been called on the carpet by some best of iTunes podcasters who said, you need to make this more about your advice, pointing to you. I resisted that. And then I realized, hey, they may be on to something. I mean, certainly I never disrespect the expertise. So this is actually moving to a weekly. I would like to hear any questions that you have about interviewing, not about podcasting, because you can go buy the same $2,000 courses that I invested in. A lot of people ask me some very low level questions, and just about where do you host? It's really easy to find places to host. And if I'm answering a question like, where do you host your stuff, and I'm using a paid service, which I do, why would you not shop my answer? There are a lot of questions about podcasting. I'm not the guy. I just don't get jazzed about that. You can go to Cliff Ravenscraft, who actually does not. He's the first guy I learned from. He was the podcast answer man. I think at this point, he does not really want to do podcasting questions either. I think Pat Flynn has some kind of a podcasting course. You can go to John Lee Dumas, who, of course, revolutionized the daily interview format, and he's someone that I've invested in as well. So those are great places where, if you choose to invest your money, you can do that. And I've just realized, hey, if people aren't investing in someone else's program so that they can get the answers to pretty basic podcasting questions. I don't need to be the one answering those questions. I'm not going to put myself, with all due respect, to the other people asking the question, as well as myself, and as well as all of my guests that I've interviewed. I'm not the guy for podcasting questions. What I am interested in is helping equip other seven-figure organizations, or even if you're just have a smaller staff than that, helping you leverage the power of third-party validation, the power of intentional interviews, and the power of setting that up so that you are shown in a favorable light. Really, interviews as public relation tools, so that you're not being asked gotcha questions and put on the defense. I know what that's like. I never do that to any of my guests, but I know what that's like. Or if you remember the Chris Farley show from the 90s, Saturday Night Live, that's almost as bad, because you look like a doofus when you have someone who is not very confident, not very articulate, somebody who is beating themselves up verbally on camera. That may be something that we reverse engineer in the future. That might be kind of fun. Or someone like a What's Up With That interviewer from more recently on Saturday Night Live, who just basically has you sitting there and they're talking about themselves. They're doing all the talking instead of asking the questions. That not good. Instead, having a prepared interviewer, having prepared questions, having not scripted questions either, but having a very organic, well done promotional campaign to help whatever you are doing, really help you sidestep a lot of the time wasting repetitive questions that you have. This has been a passion for me for several years now, come to think of it. I've always been interested in high performers, subject matter experts, etc. And at the same time, it's been something that I didn't feel qualified to actually deliver on, because at that time I hadn't put together an entire year of almost 400 daily interviews like I have right now. So I am looking forward to this. If you're watching this a little bit later, behind the live taping, feel free to ask me a question about interviewing, not about podcasting, because I am going to, from here on out, I'm just going to steer everybody. And I know I'm going to keep getting questions about that, because it's pretty natural. You see the fancy, podcasting equipment, and you want to ask me questions. The answer is really invest. I invested, you can invest, or I'm not going to go too deep about that. But I am interested in anything that would help you about interviewing, and what I've learned from all of these interviews, including hyper batch interviewing, where I've interviewed up to 10 people in a morning and another 5 people in the evening, and really enjoyed that, and kept at a very, very high caliber. I think that's something very unique about what I've achieved and accomplished. And I can see I am 5 minutes late for my appointment. I do not like doing that. Take care, everybody. I am signing off right now. I am late. Take care.